What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. It's week 10 of the fantasy football season, so what we got for you guys today is 10 waiver wire pickups that I would be targeting heading into this week. Hopefully that we could pick up and use to potentially keep pushing towards those fantasy football playoffs. Now, this week did have quite a few injuries, so a lot of these players have been beneficiaries of injuries. We'll talk about all of that, but with that being said, let's not waste any more time. Let's hop right into today's video and let's start talking about these waiver wire pickups. Now, as I always do, I'm going to provide you guys with some waiver wire priorities. These players are above that 50% threshold that I always like to target. However, if you are in a smaller league, maybe you're in a less competitive league that's a work league, 8-man, 10-man, all of those things, maybe these players are available and they are certainly worth picking up if they are. Those players are going to be Kyle Monangai, Romeo Dobbs, Kareem Hunt, RJ Harvey, Caleb Williams, Trey Benson, Harold Fannin, Josh Downs, Troy Franklin, and Joe Flacco. We've talked about a lot of these players on previous week's waiver wire episodes and stash videos as we head into each of these weekends. So with that being said, let's just get into my first guy. The first player that I want to talk about is going to be Parker Washington, wide receiver for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, Parker Washington was a beneficiary coming into this game because Travis Hunter was placed on IR. So obviously Parker Washington was going to step in and fill some of that slot role here in Jacksonville. Now, he is only rostered in about 27% of leagues. He was able to go in 8 catches, 9 targets for 90 yards in this game against the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, the thing is too, Bryant Thomas Jr. injured his ankle in this game as well. So Parker Washington going into next week could be a player that probably sees even more of a target share if for some reason Brian Thomas can't suit up or if he's limited, because we know that now Travis Hunter's out for a short period of time with the IR stint and now BTJ's hurt. So Parker Washington certainly a player where if you need some wide receiver help, he is definitely worth the pickup. And I think right now probably my number one player on the waiver wire this week. Now, my second player we should pick up is going to be at the tight end position. It's going to be Colston Loveland. He is currently sitting at 27% rostership and he went out and had a big day against the Cincinnati Bengals. We talked about last week how his snap percentages had been trending up over the last couple of weeks since the bye week there for the Chicago Bears and how rookies often are beneficiaries of post-bye bumps. Well, Colston Loveland saw that this week, 6 for 7 in the receiving department for 118 total yards and 2 touchdowns. One of them was the game-winning play. A little bit of a broken play. You know, you got to make that tackle if you're the Cincinnati defense, but at the end of the day, Colston Loveland certainly came in, showed out. I think he's going to be a player that probably has even more of a role as the year goes on, and he kind of benefited it in this game as well because Cole Kmet left with a concussion. Maybe that's going to linger into the next week. We don't really know. Sometimes with the concussions, these players miss at least one game. I do think maybe that could be the case here in this one. So Colston Loveland is worth a pickup if you're a team that maybe lost Tucker Kraft this weekend and are looking for some tight end help. Now, maybe you're looking for a quarterback as well because we did have some quarterback injuries. JJ McCarthy is a player that you could certainly go pick up. Currently rostered in about 25% of leagues. We talked about him on, I think it was the stash episode last week, because the rest of season schedule for the Minnesota Vikings from a fantasy perspective is very good for quarterbacks. It's the easiest remaining quarterback schedule from a fantasy perspective. So JJ McCarthy is a player that I definitely would be looking at picking up this week. He went out and played pretty well against this Detroit Lions defense. 143 passing yards, 2 passing touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown in this game as well. He's a player that I think is only going to get better as he gets more starts under his belt and probably gets a little bit more comfortable in the NFL. So definitely a player that I'd be looking at if you need some quarterback help. Like I said, the schedule is very good for JJ McCarthy. Now, I mentioned a Tucker Kraft injury. The beneficiary of that is going to be Luke Musgrave. I think he's certainly a player that you could be looking to pick up here this week. He went 3 for 3 for 34 total yards after Kraft left this game. And the thing is that Tucker Kraft had a knee injury that is going to be season ending, or at least that's the way that it's sounding at this point in time. So I think Luke Musgrave, currently rostered in 0% of leagues. Obviously, he's not rostered in 0 leagues, but the roster percentage is definitely that low. So I think he's a player that's going to be widely available for everybody. If you're looking for a tight end in an offense that is very good, they didn't look this good this week, but we know that this is a good offense here in Green Bay. I think Luke Musgrave is certainly worth a pickup because he is going to be the tight end one in this offense moving forward for the rest of the season. Now, if you're looking for another wide receiver to potentially pick up, I think Tory Horton is a name that you can look at, currently rostered in 14% of leagues. He went 4 for 4 for 48 total yards and 2 touchdowns in that stomping that the Seattle Seahawks gave the Washington Commanders. Now, obviously, this was because Cooper Kupp was not in the lineup. He was dealing with a hamstring injury. I don't know how much time Cooper Kupp is going going to miss. It sounded like he was a game time decision this last week, so maybe he's going to be a little bit healthier going into this next week, and he is going to play. I do think that Tory Horton is a player that has shown enough flashes where if you do have extra bench space, or if you do have Cooper Kupp, maybe you can go and get a guy like Tory Horton and see if he's going to be a guy that gets a little bit more involved into this offense, because I do think long term for Seattle, and maybe this is getting a little bit more into some dynasty analysis, but I do think long term, Tory Horton is going to be the number 2 wide receiver next to Jackson Smith and Jigba, and I don't think that Cooper Kupp is going to be that guy for a very long time here for Seattle. So let's go on to the next player. The next player is going to be Marcus Mariota at the quarterback position. We did have a Jaden Daniels injury. It was a dislocated elbow. They did say that the MRIs came back negative, so that is a good thing for Jaden Daniels. However, he's going to miss an extended period of time here for the Commanders again with another injury this year. It's kind of just been unfortunate for Jaden Daniels this year, but Marcus Mariota dropped down to 10% rostership when Jaden Daniels came back in the lineup. He can be picked up again if you need some quarterback help. Like I said, there have been some injuries. Guys like CJ Stroud got a concussion. Maybe he misses next week. If you're looking for streaming options, Marcus Mariota is a player that I'm okay picking up and putting into my lineup because of some of the rushing upside that he possesses here for the Washington Commanders. So let's go on to this next player. It's going to be at the running back position. It's Emanuel Wilson for Green Bay, 24% rostership. Right now, we've seen him get a little bit more involved over the last couple of weeks. 7 touches for 17 total yards this week. It wasn't the greatest. Like I said, the Green Bay offense did not look good here in week 9, but I do think that Emanuel Wilson has shown that he is going to be a high-end handcuff for Josh Jacobs. He has been worked in, like I said, and the rest of season schedule for the Green Bay Packers running backs is good from a fantasy perspective. So if you're looking for running backs you can potentially stash that could be league winners if the injury bug comes and visits a couple of these backfields, I think Emanuel Wilson is definitely a player that could be added as a stash for some injury insurance. Or if you're the Josh Jacob manager, I do think you probably need to pick up Emanuel Wilson and just hold him right now as we approach these fantasy football playoffs, because you don't want to end up losing a running back and not have an insurance policy. I think Wilson is definitely the insurance policy here in Green Bay. Now I have another wide receiver as well. For me, it's going to be Alec Pierce, who had 13 targets in this game this week. He went 6 for 13 for 115 yards, no touchdowns, rostered in about 27% of leagues. This is a player who's been the deep threat in a fast-paced offense. Daniel Jones obviously didn't look too good in this game against Pittsburgh. They did lose this one. They were favorites going into the matchup, but I think Alec Pierce is a big play threat in this offense. Still think he's kind of the number 2B, I think, next to Josh Downs and Michael Pittman Jr., but it does feel like he has some of the more valuable targets deep downfield that could result in big plays and boom weeks for fantasy football. So I think Alec Pierce, if you're looking for some wide receiver help or a guy that you can pick up and stream in any given matchup, I still like targeting the offense here in Indianapolis because they are fast-paced. They do score a lot of points. It was a bad week for them this week, but at the end of the day, Alec Pierce is certainly a player you can pick up and stream. Now, one more guy that I think at the running back position you can target is going to be Devin Singletary for the New York Giants. Obviously, Cam Skadbu had the ankle injury, and that's why Tyrone Tracy was one of the biggest pickups, a priority pickup for us, a guy that you would blow a lot of your fab on last week. And I do think that he's still going to remain the guy that I favor in this backfield, but Devin Singletary was a little bit more involved than I thought he would be. 10 touches, 51 total yards, rostered in about 28% of leagues. Look, this is just a guy that I think is going to get some touches in this backfield. Tracy doesn't profile as a bell cow. However, I do think Tracy's the more talented player, does profile as the pass catcher. It didn't turn out that way in this game, but wasn't the best game from New York either. At the end of the day, Devin Singletary should be picked up. I still favor Tyrone Tracy, but both of these players need to be added in fantasy football leagues. So let's go to the last player that we can talk about. For me, it's going to be DeMario Douglas, and he was a beneficiary of a Kayshon Boutte hamstring injury that happened in this game. We don't know if he's going to miss any time, but if he does, Douglas does look like the beneficiary in this offense. He's rostered in about 6% of leagues. He goes 4 for 6 for 100 yards and a touchdown in this game against Atlanta. And obviously, we know how good Drake May has been playing this year, so if you're looking for some wide receiver help, again, like I said, if Boutte goes through the week, doesn't really progress on the injury report, or does look like he's going to miss this game, Douglas would be a fine play going here into week 10 of the fantasy football season. All right, so there you have it. That is 10 plus players that you guys can pick up or target on the waiver wire this week, probably 15 plus if you count for the priority ads in those smaller leagues. Hopefully you guys found somebody today that you can target on the waiver wire. If you did, do me the favor and hit that like button. It is the best free way to show this channel some support. Also, make sure you guys are subscribed. We're trying to get to 7,500 subscribers here, so if you're not subscribed, do me the favor and hit that subscribe button as well. We're trying to help you guys win your fantasy football championships this year, and go join our free Discord. We do have a free Discord linked in the description, helping you guys with those fantasy football teams 24/7, 365. But with all of that being said, I have nothing else for you guys today, so I will see you on our next episode. But until then, peace out.